Hello, everybody. Here is Eva J, and I'm here to read the second part of the Copper Coins. Sorry that it's taken me so long to get this part up, but I've had a lot of stuff going on in my personal life that I won't go into here, but I did not forget about you, and I did not forget about the story. So I'm going to start reading chapter 2, and if you haven't read part 1, if you haven't heard part 1 yet, it's here on my channel, and you can take a listen, and then you'll be up to speed on everything. So without further ado, here is part 2 of the Copper Coins. As the sun rose the following morning, Michael awoke to the sounds of birds singing from a nearby tree. Had yesterday been a dream, he asked himself. He was still not certain about what had actually transpired, but he knew that the wisdom in the words had somehow reminded him that all would be well. He dusted himself off as he stood up and began to collect his belongings. The day before had not reaped a good deal of progress. In fact, he would have been much faster if he did not willingly accept the burden of carrying so many things. Regardless, he made himself ready to go and took on note that the others had finally woken up and were preparing to leave as well. Tossing some sand over the now tiny campfire, Michael made certain that it was completely out before grabbing the items he had been carrying and starting down the path that had led to the village. They still had about a half a day left before they would reach civilization, and Michael could not help but feel surprised by the fact that his companions had not insisted on traveling through the night. After about an hour from the campsite, Michael had once again fallen behind and was trudging along in the hopes of keeping up with the others. After even more time had passed, he raised his head to see that the others had reached a fork in the road and had stopped walking. It was apparent that they were now waiting for him to arrive and tell them which way they should go. "Go left," he called out to them and watched as they started in the direction he had indicated. Once he had reached the fork, he was surprised to see that the three men had stopped further down the road. Coming closer, he could see that instead of waiting for him, they were now hunched over something that was on the ground and was glistening in the mid-morning sunlight. By this time he had reached the group. His eyes widened when he noticed that scattered along the ground were literally hundreds of copper-colored coins. Amidst them were several dozen silver and gold coins. For a split second, Michael watched in stunned silence as the more valuable of the coins were quickly being gathered by the three men. For her part, Isabella was standing and watching as they greedily plowed through the pile of copper coins in order to extract the silver and gold ones. Finishing the task, they left the rest of the coins idly on the ground. Michael took a deep breath as his thoughts began to drift. Was this the reward I was told of last night, he asked himself. These copper coins may not be worth too terribly much to those men, but they would most assuredly provide me lodging for at least a night at the inn. With these thoughts still in mind, he dropped the luggage before getting down on his hands and knees and grabbing his rucksack. He then opened it and began to pull everything out that he had brought with him. Once it was empty, he began to scoop up the copper coins and drop them all inside the bag. Upon hearing the sounds being made by the coins as they were being collected, the men stopped and turned around to see what Michael was doing. "What are you doing, you foolish fellow?" the first man shouted at him. "You have already slowed us down enough as it is. Why would you want to take those worthless coins with you?" Michael said nothing. Instead, he continued to collect the coins, and when he had them all in the rucksack, he began to return his other items to it as well. "You're crazy to grab all those useless coins," the second man said as Michael swung the rucksack over his shoulder and began to reach for the rest of the items he had been carrying. Getting to his feet, the mocking words continued to fill his ears as the first man continued speaking. "You're going to break your back trying to carry all that." The third man simply shrugged his shoulders, but instead of offering to assist Michael, he ran to catch up with his cohorts. This left Michael standing with Isabella, who was now staring at him with bemused expression on her face. "Can I at least help you?" she asked. He shook his head. "Don't worry, I'm stronger than I look." "You're also a gentleman," she said, opting to slow down so that she could walk in step with him. "At least they can't get angry with you for holding them back, since I'm going slowly too." He smiled. "You're very kind, Isabella." I wasn't yesterday, but something you said changed me. You seem so sure that everything is going to be all right, and somehow you make me believe it. I can't explain it, but I feel as though things will work out just fine. When we reach the palace, then I will tell the king of your kindness. I'm certain that he would love to meet you. I won't be going to the palace with you, Michael said honestly. You're going there to find your future, and I must do the same in a different place entirely. You mean the apprenticeship? She asked. Yes, he nodded. Understanding her words, she lowered her head, but her next question emerged nonetheless. Why did you pick up the coins if they were so worthless? To you they are worthless, perhaps because you have more money than what was lying there on the ground. To a humble farmer like me, they are of great value, he said. Your companions grabbed the silver and gold ones because they were more valuable and left more these behind. Why do you suppose they did that? I guess because they didn't want to carry them, she said with a small smile. Perhaps, but maybe the reason lies in them having more than I. They are better dressed than me, and they mustn't contend with worries about things like food or shelter. They did me a favor by not taking them, but because they viewed them as useless, I will have a place to stay tonight when we arrive at the village. I never thought of it that way, she said honestly. I guess you probably think me to be rather petty. No, he said with an adamant shake of his head. You just have a different view of the world than I do. She nodded as they continued to walk. The sun was beginning its descent beyond the trees when they finally arrived at the village. Michael's back was in terrible pain by this time, but as in the past, he did not offer up any complaints. Relief filled them when they finally reached the door leading into the inn. He stopped walking, and with finality he dropped the bags on the ground at the feet of the three men and spoke. Gentlemen, this is where our journey together ends. He started towards the door and listened as the three of them began to converse. What are we going to do now? One of them asked. Oh, that's easy. We can hire someone to carry our things to the palace, the first man was saying. We're rich now. He patted his pockets, but instead of feeling the hardness of the coins that he had found while out on the road, he felt something soft. Digging his hand inside, he pulled out a large fistful of sand. What is this? He shouted as he unclasped his fist, and small granules drifted from his fingers and landed on the ground. Where's my money? Seeing this, the other two men reached into their pockets as well and discovered that instead of carrying gold and silver coins, they too were carrying sand. The idea of being as rich as their boss dried up immediately, and they were left staring at one another in open-mouthed astonishment. After some moments had passed, they looked towards Michael, who was still standing in the doorway with an equally flabbergasted look on his face. He was no longer pondering the fate of the three men. Instead, he was wondering if his copper coins had turned into sand as well. Could that be the reason why his belongings had become so unbearably heavy during the final miles of their journey? He removed the rucksack from his shoulders and slowly lowered it to the ground. As soon as it was resting there, he opened it and stuck his hand inside. When he felt the smoothness of the coins still inside, his eyes widened and he grabbed a single coin and pulled his hand back out. Seeing this, the first man regarded him. Well, he asked, what is it? Michael opened a hand, and the entire group gasped. In the palm of his hand, he held a single gold coin. You stole that, the first man shouted. You're a thief. Isabella shook her head at the man as her eyes narrowed dangerously. No, he is not. But, milady, the second man objected, all that was left on the ground were copper coins. How do you explain his having a gold coin if he didn't steal it from one of us? Isabella looked at the men and spoke. When we left the place where you had all found those coins, you three were walking further and further ahead of us and were getting quite cross because Michael was lagging so far behind. The truth remained that he carried all of our things because you were too lazy to carry your own load. From the time that we left the path where those coins were found, I was walking with him, and there was no way that he could have stolen any of the coins from you. It was simply not possible. Then why are our coins gone? The third man asked. What does it matter? She responded with a question of her own. When none of the men said anything, she continued. Maybe the coins were a figment of your imagination. No, they weren't imagined, because if they were, I wouldn't have had this one at all, Michael said as he extended the coin towards her. When she did not take it away, he put it in his pocket. Michael, maybe the truth is there's someone with magic beyond any of our comprehension who knew that you would accept the copper coins. Maybe in some ways they were showing us that the copper coins were worth more than the silver and gold ones, she said. That's impossible, the first man grumbled. He's right. Copper coins aren't worth nearly as much as silver and gold ones are, Michael said. The fact that their coins turned to sand while this one turned to gold completely escapes all scientific logic. Well, maybe everyone here simply got what they deserved, Isabella said. You were kind and polite, even when treated as though you were a servant. You helped us get here and ended up carrying far more than what you were expected. As she was speaking, she turned towards the three men. Now, instead of you throwing accusations around about being stolen from, you must remember that you were the ones who called him a fool for collecting those copper coins in the first place. You were the first to arrive at the spot where the coins had been left, and you could have chosen to collect the copper coins, but you did not. Instead, you took what you thought was the most valuable and left the rest. Feeling sheepish, the three men quieted as she continued speaking. I think we must now part company. Michael, you must get some rest, and we must seek passage to the palace. Michael pointed down the simple path that led into the heart of the village. You may find passage further down this road, where there are those with carts who can bring you to the palace. It's not as fancy as you're accustomed, but they can still get you there safely. Isabella nodded as she reached for his hand. I am certain of that. I knew that the memories of our journey may not have been especially nice for you, but I want you to know that I'm grateful that we have met, and I wish you all the best. Thank you, Isabella, he said. I hope everything works out for you and the prince. It will, she said, smiling as she went over to join the three men. Once they had disappeared in the distance, Michael picked up his rucksack and entered the inn. After securing himself a place of lodging, Michael was led up the stairs and into a room. As soon as the door had been closed, he placed the rucksack on the floor and took a deep breath. The gold coin he had retrieved from it had been enough to ensure a room for the night, as well as dinner and breakfast. He smiled at the prospect of going back down the stairs in order to have something substantial to eat. Before leaving the room, he could not shake the notion that the contents of his rucksack. He knew that there were coins inside, as he had felt them when out on the road, but he was uncertain as to what kind they were. He could not help but ponder whether or not they were copper, or if they had changed to gold, as Isabella had surmised. He remembered the night before when the spirit of his mother had said that he would get his just reward. Somehow finding the coins had been reward enough, and he was grateful that they enabled him to understand what his father had meant before he left home. He never expected to find the copper coins on the road, but he did, and that had proven to be a wondrous thing. His thoughts shifted to when the three men discovered that their gold and silver coins had turned into sand. Michael had always understood that good deeds reap good results, but he never imagined that the contrary could happen as well. Perhaps that was what his mother's spirit had meant when she told him that no deed lacks a reward. He picked up the rucksack and opened it, just as he had done on the road. He carefully pulled his possessions from it before placing them on the floor. Next, he turned his bag over and poured the contents onto the bed. Much to his surprise, all of the copper coins had, in fact, turned to gold. Perhaps there is a reason for everything after all, he thought as he ran his hand through his pile of coins and allowed them to fall between his fingers. If I hadn't have left home in the first place, I would never have found these coins, he whispered to the stillness. Instead, my family and I would have most certainly starved. Happily, Michael returned the coins and possessions to the rucksack before placing the bag next to the bed. He then walked towards the door leading out into the hallways. As he stepped out of the room and closed the door behind him, he made his way down the stairs. As he walked, the only thought that was coursing through his mind was, after breakfast tomorrow, I'm going back home to my family, and I will share in this wonderful fortune with them. The end. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope that you have a wonderful Advent season and you enjoy the beauty and the majesty that comes with this time of year. I will be back again with more stories, and I started something with a group of people called Creative Sprints, which is writing stories with like 20-minute time periods and seeing what I just can create or what I can come up with. Um, it is through another channel that I actively uh, watch off and on. And if you're interested, it's called Creative Sprints, and it's done by a lady named Autumn who does really wonderful work. So um, I would recommend it if you're into creative ideas like this, and if you want to take up writing stories or any kind of creative activity. It's really a great way to get over writer's block and do something really fun. So, with that said, take care, have a good day, enjoy whatever it is you're doing, and many blessings to you. Bye.